The thing that I think might change Labour Party's policy on this, for instance, on the question of selling arms to Israel or not, like pausing the sale of weapons to Israel, which has happened under Blair and it happened under Thatcher, it wouldn't be that kind of internal party pressure or grassroots pressure as you're describing. I think it would be a change of geopolitical circumstances. I think that if we saw if we saw the US wanting to put pressure on Israel, but perhaps not wanting to do it itself, then it could be quite useful if the UK was doing that. I think if we saw, we're definitely going to see horrendous scenes from Rafah in the coming days and weeks. You've got 1.5 million civilians trapped in a very, very small area with totally inadequate food, totally inadequate energy. You just imagine what it's like for parents who've taken their kids to where they hope they're going to be safe, and now suddenly they're told we're trapped in this place and we're going to be attacked. It must be absolutely terrifying, and I think that's the kind of thing that could potentially sway Starmer in terms of his policy, and indeed I think it could hypothetically sway Sunak. But there is, you're asking about the negative impact that this could have on Starmer in terms of there being protest votes against him because of Gaza and Israel. I think the negative impact is that it gums up the system for his political and his communications operation, right?
Yeah.
Because
it becomes the dominant. You often have this thing where there are small groups who feel very strongly about one issue and they shout the loudest and they're all over social media.
Yeah, exactly. And so it kind of gums up your political and your communications operation. I experienced this plenty when I used to work for the party. You want to be talking about how many green jobs you're going to create, or how you're going to give social care workers the power to collectively negotiate for better wages. But instead, you've got to persuade your MPs that your nuanced stance on Gaza is the right one. And instead, you've got to give you've got to answer questions in the media about this issue. So that's the substantive political negative
that does have an impact. Can I ask you, in terms of what both Rishi Sunak and indeed the Labour Party want to be talking about this week is about the economy, and it's interesting because Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, talking about how the Conservatives and Rishi Sunak are gaslighting the British people about the state of economy, because Rishi Sunak is saying, look, things are getting better. Look, they are. I mean, we've gone over the peak of the absurdly high inflation. Hopes at some point over the summer we're going to see interest rates coming down. There's an interest rate decision this week, although again it doesn't look like we're going to see interest rates coming down as soon as many people would want. That would affect, of course, not just people's mortgages but rents as well, as 2/3 of the people in this country pay one or the other. But the economy is improving. Why does Rachel Reeves say that the Tories are gaslighting the British people on this?
Well, I mean, for the 1.5 million households, which ends up being, about 5 million individuals, something like that, who are renegotiating their mortgages this year, I mean, I don't think it looks like things are improving for them. They're going to see their mortgages go up, by thousands of quid a month. It's totally impossible for lots of people to afford that. And for those who can afford it...
How would that be different if Labour were in charge?
So the short answer is, Labour wouldn't be able to impact. So they wouldn't be able to impact interest rates because, of course, they're set independently by the Bank of England. What I mean is that the message from the Conservatives, from Sunak, that things are getting better, I mean, that's just objectively untrue for those roughly 5 million individuals. Also, it's really important to remember that, okay, inflation has slowed down. It's getting towards that healthy 2% that the Bank of England aims at. But prices for your supermarket shop, prices of heating your home this winter, or, heating water for having a shower today, yes, those have stabilised, but it's not like they're going to collapse. They're not going down. We're not having deflation.
But again, what would be different under Labour?
Wages are only growing slowly.
This is the thing. So I think there's been it's been a terrible economic hit for millions and millions of people. However, what would be different under Labour? But given that virtually every single point, whether it's caused by lockdown or sanctioning Russia over Ukraine, all of these things. I mean, Labour's fully on board on all of those policies. So what would be different?
Well, firstly, I totally agree that loads of the economic negatives right now for Sunak are external and out of his control, but that's kind of why it's so embarrassing when he starts claiming that he's got a plan. Like, he doesn't have a choice. Like, loads of this stuff is decided by the
Labour don't have a plan then?
So the difference is, firstly, that of course Labour would have done things differently over the last.
Well, we'd have had a longer
14
lockdown.
years.
We'd have had a longer lockdown. We'd have handed out more money. I mean, so we'd be in a worse economic state.
Wouldn't have had Liz Truss, so we wouldn't have had a guilt crisis. So
Well,
the
we
Bank
would
of
still
England
have had
wouldn't have
interest
had to
rates
worry.
going up. Interest rates were going to go up anyway. They wouldn't have jumped quite so quickly as a result of that.
Right, exactly.
Budget.
They wouldn't have
gone
jumped
up.
quite so quickly.
But they would have gone up.
Oh, 100%, because the Bank of England has control over it. But the Bank of England, one of the things that they had to worry about when they were making their interest rate decisions was the gilts crisis that Liz Truss caused. So, actually, who would have been in charge at the time?
I mean, it
has a
was
really big
exposed.
difference.
It was already a guilt crisis, I would suggest, by the fact that it could have such an impact. But this is my thing, is that I don't think the Tories have done a very good job on a lot of these things. What I'm trying to find out is, what is it that Labour think that they're going to do differently? You're going to have exactly the same bunch of books. You're going to have exactly the same, wars that you're dealing with. What are you going to be able to do differently? I mean, and you ain't going to have any money to hand out to people like, oh, we'll make everyone better off. How are you going to make anyone better off when you've got exactly the same stuff in the in tray, whether it's Keir Starmer in number 10 or whether it's Rishi Sunak?
Well, look, I'll start by saying how I agree with you, Julia, and then I'll tell you why I disagree.
I like this technique. I like this. You should be a politician.
Real media savvy. I would be a little bit too honest from the sounds of that. Look, the way that I completely agree with you is that in the future, let's say Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister, he is going to have the most horrendous in tray, and it's only going to get worse. And I don't think that Labour has announced yet, what it would do if China invaded Taiwan, but you wouldn't really expect a government to do that. What I would admit, though, is that Labour is going to have to introduce, as radically ambitious a policy approach as you can possibly imagine when those huge challenges to the global economy do appear, as they probably will. I don't mean specifically an invasion of Taiwan, but I mean that kind of thing. It's coming, and we're talking about extreme weather caused by human-made climate change.
No, we haven't. No, because no evidence for that whatsoever. It's just nonsense. It's just not. That's not true. It's just simply not true.
Well, anyway, I'll keep on answering your question. So, in terms of actually what would Labour be doing, though? So they're talking about growing the economy by investing in green jobs in the future, so that we can compete with China. They're saying we're going to make local councils.
Can't compete with China because you insist on having net zero, and net zero means we can't economically compete with China because there you have a load of coal-fired power stations.
I mean, of course, the problem with that, Julia, is that the jobs of the future are going to be those green jobs. We know that that's where cheap energy that brings down new bills and also protects our kids' future. We know that that's where those jobs come from. And we've got to be competing with China.
We should be competing with China. We should be building fossil fuel energy systems so we can actually compete on energy. We're going to have to leave it there. I disagree with that. I love how Labour would describe there are going to be no green jobs that aren't subsidised, which means they ain't good for the economy.